James Connolly was born on June 5, 1868 in Edinburgh, Scotland to Irish immigrant parents. Connolly, however, was not born into a family of privilege. He instead was raised in an Irish slum called Little Ireland. Due to his socioeconomic status, James received a basic primary education and left school at the age of 11 to join the workforce. He got a job with Edinburgh's evening newspaper where he worked as a devil cleaning inky rollers and fetching beer and food for the adult workers. His life as a laborer was short-lived due to the economic climate of Scotland. As a result, he followed his older brother's footsteps by enlisting in the British Army at the age of 14. After his enlistment, the military sent him to Ireland where he served for the next 7 years. While in Dublin, he witnessed the abuse the British Army inflicted upon the Irish people. This mistreatment of Irish citizens caused Connolly to develop a deep hatred for the British Army that lasted throughout the remainder of his life. However, not all things in Ireland infuriated Connolly because he met his future wife, a Protestant woman named Lily Reynolds. They were engaged in 1888, and after learning that his company was being transferred to India, Connolly withdrew from the army and returned to Edinburgh to start a family. After spending a few years in Edinburgh, James and his family moved to Dublin after a secretarial position opened up at the Dublin Socialist Club. The position enticed the Connollys because it paid £1 per week, a significant sum of money during the 1890s. Connolly, however, had a difficult job ahead of him because he had to convince Dublin comrades that the emancipation of Ireland and the emancipation of the Irish working class were common causes. Despite opposition, on May 29, 1896, Connolly convinced 8 men to leave the Dublin Socialist Club and establish the Irish Socialist Republican Party, otherwise known as the ISRP. Connolly was elected ISRP organizer, and a few months later they created a manifesto that stated, "The agricultural industrial system of a free people, like their political system, ought to be an accurate reflex of the democratic principle by the people, for the people, solely in the interests of the people." Essentially, the party sought to ensure the equality of the working class and establish a democratic freedom for the people of Ireland. For those who attended the ISRP meetings and paid the entrance fee of 6 pence, they were given a green membership card with the phrase, "The greats appear great because we are on our knees. Let us rise." James Connolly and Robert Deverman were the main speakers, and their task was to convince skeptics that socialist principles were held by some of Ireland's revolutionary heroes. While serving in the ISRP, Connolly published his first essay, Ireland for the Irish. This essay discussed how British Home Rule ridiculed the actions of the Irish people. The growing success of the ISRP, the actions of other anti-imperialist groups, and the influence of Connolly's essays caught the attention of Queen Victoria in 1900. The Queen's visit in Dublin lasted a month and was designed to increase support for the British Empire. However, Connolly was among the leading individuals that caused civil unrest during her presence. Although the Queen received a relatively warm welcome, nationalist groups organized torchlight demonstrations against the royal visit. This caused the Dublin Metropolitan Police to attack the crowd, specifically targeting Connolly, other nationalist leaders, and various newspaper editors. After the Queen's visit, Connolly spent the next several years traveling through Europe to spread word of the ISRP, socialism, republicanism, and labor organizations. However, Connolly then decided it was best to leave Ireland to pursue a job that provided for his family in America. After taking a job collecting dues for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company in New York City, Connolly became involved in the Industrial Workers of the World, otherwise known as the IWW. In 1907, Connolly was offered a job as the head organizer for the IWW for the District Council of New York City. However, after 3 years of leading the IWW, an economic crisis struck New York and Connolly, at the age of 40, returned to Ireland in 1910. The next 3 years in Ireland kept Connolly busy in the nationalist headquarters of Liberty Hall in Dublin, and on August 15, 1913, 60 workers from the Irish Independent newspaper were fired for not renouncing their union membership. This act began the sympathetic strike that quickly spread throughout Dublin. The strike spurred interest in the locals, and on August 26, 1913, over 200 tram conductors brandishing the red hand badge of the Irish Transport and members of the General Workers' Union abandoned their vehicles and began an official general strike. Connolly, accompanied by Jim Larkin, seized the opportunity to speak to the crowd and rally support. The next day, Connolly was taken from Liberty Hall by the Dublin Metropolitan Police and charged with incitement. Connolly's stay in Mountjoy Jail in Dublin caused him to miss several days of political activity, but he was formulating his own version of protest. On September 7, 1913, he became one of Ireland's first political hunger strikers by refusing the prison food. After a week of the hunger strike, a deputation was organized to appeal for Connolly's clemency. James was released a day later, and he stayed with Constance Markievicz to recover from his weakened state. After recuperation, he returned to Belfast. Upon his arrival, crowds gathered at the train station, cheered him on, and Connolly became a champion for Irish nationalism. Over the next few months, a lockout threatened the workforce of Ireland, but the new problem was the rise of the First World War. Like most issues threatening Ireland's independence, Connolly was vehemently opposed to the war, and he passionately exposed the conflict as a slaughter of the working class in Europe for the benefit of capitalists. On September 9, 1914, Connolly and 14 other men that would participate in the 1916 Easter Rising gathered in the library of the Gaelic Lead at 25 Parnell Square to discuss striking a blow against the British while they were at war. The tone of this meeting was essentially, England's difficulty is Ireland's opportunity. During the course of the gathering, the group formed the Irish Neutrality League, where Connolly served as the president of the Provisional Committee. The group focused on retaining Ireland's neutrality in what they considered an English war. However, the group quickly dissolved due to a lack of member participation, but Connolly moved to Dublin, more permanently, to become General Secretary of the Irish Transport and General Workers' Union, otherwise known as the ITGWU, and the leader of the Irish Countrywomen's Association. After he took these positions, his name spread throughout Ireland as a prominent leader of Irish nationalism, especially after Jim Larkin's departure to America. Connolly's reputation swiftly rose, and in the busiest year of his life, 1915, he spent his time writing, organizing, and fighting a losing battle against the huge numbers that were joining the British Army. He also saved the ITGWU from financial ruin by increasing the price of a membership to 4 pence, the same price to buy a pint of Guinness. The membership grew steadily under the affordable new rate, and each rally that Connolly hosted attracted 2,000 to 3,000 attendees. Meanwhile, he voraciously wrote journal articles concerning the organization of the ITGWU and instructional essays on military operations. Under his control, Liberty Hall became a strong symbol for Irish freedom, and soon, Connolly would control the Irish Citizen Army within its walls as the Commandant General. Connolly first wore the Irish Citizen Army uniform on April 16, 1916. On that same day, several thousand spectators had gathered to witness the ICA hoist a Republican flag over Liberty Hall. As soon as the flag was blowing in the wind, several thousand cheers rose into the air along with cracks of gunfire. To Connolly, the green flag of Ireland, hoisted over Liberty Hall, was a symbol of their faith in freedom, and it also served as a monument to the working class of Dublin. That evening, Connolly gave a speech to the ICA informing them that a rising was inevitable, but he was going to fight the way he wanted, not the way the enemy wanted. As leaders of the Republican movement made plans, it became evident that a rising was going to occur during Easter. However, after Roger Casement and his weapons shipment was confiscated by the Royal Irish Constabulary, the rising was moved to the following Monday on April 24, 1916, and Connolly would serve as a de facto commander-in-chief of the Irish Nationalists. When Easter Monday arrived, Connolly and the ICA left Liberty Hall to take up arms at their appointed positions. Connolly marched his men to the General Post Office, cleared the building of the workers, smashed the windows, and strategically placed men from different vantage points in order to secure the area. On Tuesday, Connolly and the men busied themselves by fortifying the GPO and fighting back a crowd of looters. On Wednesday, the British arrived and placed a machine gun at the apex of Westmoreland Street and D'Olier Street, which poured a steady stream of hot lead down towards the post office. Throughout the conflict, Connolly remained at the front of each operation to inspire his men and keep morale alive. However, he received his first wound, a bullet laceration to the shoulder, while standing on Prince Street supervising the construction of a barricade. After he was patched up, Connolly returned to the surgery table brandishing a severely lacerated ankle wound. James suffered from severe pain and was given morphine to calm his nerves, and when he woke from his sleep, he asked the doctors to place him on a bed with wheels or casters so that he could be moved to the front hall and resume command of the garrison. While wounded, Connolly typed a message to the participants of the rising saying, "Courage, boys, we are winning, and in the hour of our victory let us not forget the splendid women who have everywhere stood by us and cheered us on. Never had man or woman a grander cause, never was a cause more grandly served." He did his best to rouse the necessary courage to win the battle, but it became apparent that the GPO was hopelessly surrounded and that parts of the roof were caving in on top of them. The GPO was evacuated that evening, and the remaining men occupied Cogan's on Tenmore Street. Connolly, due to his injuries, passed his role as Commandant General to Sean McLaughlin for the rest of the rising. It wasn't long before the Nationalists surrendered and British soldiers arrested Connolly. The guards brought James to Dublin Castle and placed him on the first floor. This area is now referred to as the Connolly Room. Connolly, unlike his companions, had his court-martial performed around his bed, but he and the British understood that his execution was imminent. He was charged on May 9, 1916 on 2 charges: taking part in an armed rebellion against the King of England and causing a rebellion among the civilian population of His Majesty. Connolly was charged not guilty on the second count, and on Thursday, May 11th, James's wife and his daughter Nora were brought to Dublin Castle to see him one last time. On May 12, 1916, Connolly was given his final meal in bed and was transported to an ambulance where he was taken to Kilmainham Jail. The firing squad consisted of 13 men brandishing loaded rifles with one rifle containing a blank conscience round. The description of his execution is as follows: ready, present, fire. These were the last words that Connolly heard. 2 shots hit his head and 1 shot entered his abdomen. The rest of the firing squad aimed for the piece of white paper pinned to Connolly's chest. The intensity of their firing was such that a large chunk of the back of the chair was blown away. After the execution, his family was denied the privilege of burying his body, and he was placed in the cemetery attached to a British military prison at Arbor Hill. James Connolly was 47 years old at the time of his execution at Kilmainham Jail. He started from a humble background, but emerged as a prominent figure in Irish history. He made his choices for the sole purpose of preserving Irish culture, establishing socialism, and freeing the Irish citizens from the oppression of the British. 2 weeks before the Easter Rising, Connolly penned this statement that sums up his life ambitions and decision-making. "We are out for Ireland for the Irish, but who are the Irish? Not the rack-renting, slum-owning landlord, not the sweating, profit-grinding capitalist, not the sleek, oily lawyer, not the prostitute pressman, the hired liars of the enemy. Not these, but the Irish working class, the only secure foundation upon which a free nation can be reared."